Welcome back to another Planet Coaster video on this channel, ladies and gentlemen, but today is going to be slightly different because we're not going to be visiting Velocity Lake, which is the series I am currently working on this channel. Instead, we're going to do a slight divergence and build a little micro park. Basically, a very, very small theme park. It's going to be like a little two-part series on this channel. I hope you enjoy the ride. Now, this sparked because I'm a member of the Bro Nation Discord server, which is a Planet Coaster themed server, and at the moment, there is a thing that we can't talk about in the world on YouTube that means that a lot of us are spending a bit more time at home than normal. So a little contest was devised. A member of the Discord server created a very, very small map, and we all download that map from the Steam Workshop and construct our own small park inside the map. There are a few rules to the challenge. You have to have at least one track ride, so a coaster, car ride, dark ride, etc. At least one flat ride, and at least one shop and stall. You also can't modify anything that is currently in the park, which you can see I have loaded the map up. So we've got a nice, cute little entrance building. There's a sort of backstage area with some, I guess, that's the staff cars and some delivery trucks. As you can see, by the way, zooming out, this is the size of the workspace we have. So I got this like prefabricated Vekoma boomerang coaster just to kind of show off just how limited the map size is. So I think it can just about fit a boomerang coaster if it's like placed diagonally, but then nothing else can really fit around the park. So that's kind of the size we've got to work with. So I'm going to give it my best shot. This is going to be my submission to the micro park competition on the Bro Nation Discord server. So I'm going to start off with the roller coaster because, you know, one of the rules is you've got to have some kind of track ride. And for me, I like roller coasters. This is a game called Planet Coaster, you know. 50% of the game's name is to do with roller coasters. I think we should build a roller coaster. Obviously, this is going to take up the most space against, you know, compared to anything else in the theme park. So I figured it would make sense to build this first, just so that we can know kind of how much space we've got left to work with after it's finished. The roller coaster type I decided to go with was the Eurofighter kind, just because Eurofighters are very, very compact rides in real life. Any kind of, well, most indoor theme parks, or, you know, parks with restricted space, so like ones on piers, for example, or just very small spaces. Eurofighters are generally quite preferable because they have a very, very tiny footprint. The lift hill, for example, is a completely vertical lift hill in general, and it's a completely vertical drop afterwards as well. In general, there are like launched versions and other variants and things, but a lot of them, this is kind of the setup. And as you can see, they're capable of very twisty, tightly knit layouts. So I figured the Eurofighter would be the best choice for this park. Another option I just thought about was the El Loco kind of coaster in the game, but I prefer Eurofighters just generally. And I've not built a Eurofighter in quite some time. The last time I built a Eurofighter coaster in this game, I think was all the way back in Mirror Lake, the Ancient series I made all the way back in 2017, and it was not a good park. So I would not recommend going back and looking at that series. But before that, I've not built one since. So this will be a good chance to see how I've improved as a player in terms of my ability to build Eurofighters. As you can see, the layout is pretty much done, but it's quite rough in some places, and that's because for things like the custom Heartline roll and that half loop, I used the 4-meter building method. Using the 4-meter building method, it's a very, very long-winded process. It involves building everything out of the smallest pieces in the game and then selecting 4 parts at a time, pressing smooth all once, shifting your selection 1 notch along that 4-block chain, pressing smooth again. Do that over and over again for every single segment that involves the 4-meter building technique, and eventually you get a very, very smooth outcome. But it takes a very long time. But it is worth it when you want to try and get a nice, smooth inversion. Because trying to use the coaster editor, like, in air quotes, properly, sometimes can result in quite rough or jerky inversion. So that's what I'm doing there. In case any of you are unfamiliar with the 4-meter building technique, I know I've mentioned it a lot in my Planet Coaster videos, so I'm guessing most of you are. But for those that aren't, that's what that is. And that's why I kind of built it in what may look like kind of a weird way at first. It's just how you can exploit the Planet Coaster editor to make, you know, realistic and smooth roller coasters. You'd think we'd be able to do that anyway, but there we are. We don't live in a perfect world. Planet Coaster 2 hype, anyone? Maybe they'll fix it. Who knows? Anyway, as you can see, the layout was pretty much done, but I wanted to just make the station a little bit better. I wanted to have a bit more space for the final brake run, just so our car can definitely come to a proper stop before whipping around that tight corner to get back into the station. I wanted that brake run there just so I could include a transfer track that would be able to put cars into a maintenance shed if we want to get them off the main loop. It's not actually an essential feature for a realistic Eurofighter layout because a lot of Eurofighter coasters actually don't have maintenance sheds or transfer tracks. Typically, because the cars are so small, I suppose, they're just unloaded and, reloaded, I guess, directly off a truck onto the track. There's no maintenance shed. But I wanted one anyway, and I was looking at a few Eurofighters as kind of inspiration for this. One of the ones was, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the Rollercoaster at Southend-on-Sea, that park, and that one has a transfer track, and it's a similar sort of layout to what this coaster is. So I figured, let's just do one anyway. We've got the space, we may as well try and incorporate one. I think if I had any kind of regrets about the layout of this coaster, I think it uses a bit too much space. Like, it kind of creates this box where you can't really build anything inside the layout, but there's a lot of dead space there. So maybe if I were to do this park again, or a similar micro park challenge, I might put a bit more thought into being able to get pathways to go inside the layout of the roller coaster so we can put more rides in there. Maybe I'll try and build some bridges at some point, but for now I think the park is done, so I'm not going to touch it. But maybe, I don't know, in a moment of reflection and I can look back on how things went, maybe that's something I could have done slightly better. But you guys, can leave your own thoughts once you've seen the finished product of this park. Maybe you might think that these concerns are a bit unfounded and it's all fine. Who knows? Anyway, what am I doing now? Oh, here I'm just making the transfer track itself. So what I used to do typically was I would build a roller coaster and just be done with it. And then I would make another roller coaster and just have it be like one little piece of track, but it would always be a separate ride. But then I realized that you don't actually have to do that. You can just kind of edit the track, create the divergence directly off the roller coaster that you want to put the transfer track on, and then kind of delete the connection between the bit that's going to be the maintenance shed, and then just auto-complete the gap. If that makes sense. That was a horrible description now I think about it. I probably should have scripted what I planned to say, but I hoped you could kind of see what I was doing by watching the screen. It's not that important anyway. We're done with the roller coaster for now. Now I wanted to focus on what would be the focal point of the park, where I wanted this thing to, you'd come in the main entrance and you'd immediately see this big ride right in front of you. So I was trying to think of what would be a good centerpiece ride. So at first I thought maybe the chair swing, which has now been relegated to the northwest corner of the theme park. And I decided in the end a Ferris wheel probably would be the most iconic. When you see when you think of fun fairs, fairgrounds, Christmas village fairground, and that's a kind of a common, or not common ornament, but like Christmas parks, that sort of thing. The Ferris wheel is so iconic. I wanted the Ferris wheel. I thought it'd be a really good centerpiece, basically. So I decided to have the Ferris wheel serve as the focal point of the park. You walk in, you're immediately greeted with the Ferris wheel. To your right, you've got the big coaster, and then on the left, we've got that big, tall drop tower as well. I mean, this is quite a cram-packed episode, so it's going to be a case of blink and you miss it in a few cases. So sorry about that. I wanted the time to be a bit faster than maybe something like an episode of Velocity Lake would be, where I wanted to touch a bit more on the nuances of building in Planet Coaster. But that's not what this mini-series is going to be. It's just going to be showing you kind of how I build a complete park in a day. I built this all in one day, basically. I thought about making this all one giant episode, to be honest, but I think it's just a bit too much to put into one episode. So I think it's going to be, it might not be. This might be an hour-long video, in which case it is just one episode. But I think in terms of how I'm managing to edit it down, it's probably going to be more feasible to do it in 2 episodes. And just like that, every single ride is now placed. I was a little bit restricted in terms of what rides I could use, because a lot of the rides in Planet Coaster have, I would argue, unnecessarily large footprints. So I had to go with some of the rides that have smaller footprints. So obviously the Ferris wheel is the exception, because I wanted to place no limits on what the centerpiece ride would be, because I wanted that to be, the big iconic part of the skyline. Everything else, I kind of wanted the chair swing because it's such a quintessential fairground ride. After that, I'm like, what else has got a small footprint? So I ended up with the loop-de-loop, the kickflip, and the drop tower. Now here is my plan. So I've used the temple pieces to kind of generally lay out how the shops and buildings are going to look in the park, just to make sure I was happy with how they would look, rather than spending 8 hours on shops only to realize I hate the layout. So that's something I sometimes do, is I use the temple pieces there to construct a general shape and layout of how I want things to go. And now we're going to bring it all to life, I guess. So the first thing we're going to do is just plop down all the shops and stuff in, their bare form, and then we'll build all the buildings around them. So here I'm just kind of trying to see what I can actually fit with Planet Coaster's grid system, because you can't really have them clipped together, for example. And stuff like the ATM, it's a bit dumb, because the ATM and stuff still takes up an entire big square on that giant grid just there, even though it's really just a tiny little thing. Like, I wanted to put an ATM here, but that restaurant block was in the way, so I had to delete a restaurant block just to accommodate that ATM, when actually in terms of the physical space it takes up, they could have fit together without clipping. But small rant aside, it's not a big problem. It was only part of the restaurant, and realistically, probably not going to be that crowded this part because it's so small. So there's probably not going to be too many guests that need to use the restaurant at one time. So there we go. We've got a restaurant. We've got lots of food stores, lots of drink stores. We've got our obligatory information booth and, of course, the first aid center as well as a staff building as well. I think in the end I ended up disabling the staff features because all my vendors kept on walking off even though everything was really crowded and I was paying them much more money than the default value. I still a feature I really like in this game, to be honest, so I just ended up disabling it. But hey, if someone wants to play this park and use the management features, then, you know, there is a staff building there. So now everything is down in place. It's time to sort out the paths a bit. So the first thing we're going to do is disable the grass. If we go back to scenario editor, I'm going to switch out one of the grass textures that isn't used in the default map thus far and change it to asphalt. And as you can see, makes things look much better. This isn't actually the asphalt I ended up going with. There are two kind of shades in this game. There's this one, which is a slightly lighter shade than the other one. The other one is the exact same color as the asphalt, path in the game. So you may have noticed that all of the queue lines and exit queues for this park generally use the tarmac path type. The idea being that once I'm done with the park and I'm happy with the layout of the fences and barriers, I'll just change the ground texture again to be the one that matches the pathway kind, and then the paths will seamlessly blend in with the ground so that there's no distinction between path and ground, which is how a lot of real theme parks are. Ones that are built on tarmac lots like this one, they'll just place barriers directly down on the tarmac. They won't just construct a separate path, which is how it currently looks. Although it's only a very slight distinction between the ground texture and the path texture, there's still a difference nonetheless. Again, that's just to help me when building, so I can definitely see where the path boundaries are, so I can put fences in the right places, make sure peeps aren't going to walk through anything. But then once it's all done, I'll change the ground texture to be the one that matches the paths. I hope all that made sense. If it didn't, doesn't matter, because you'll see. You'll see eventually. So here I'm just sort of extending. One of the rules is that you can't modify the existing park buildings, and I don't think I've actually modified the existing building at the front, but I'm extending upon it. I figured it would be okay because I'm not deleting anything, so that's kind of how I'm justifying this. I'm kind of extending it a bit just to accommodate to the staff building. All the rest will be hopefully within rule compliant. So I may have now failed this challenge, but it's still been a fun little experiment nonetheless. So I'm still glad I did it. This is the construction of the staff building, and here I'm trying to overcome one of the other annoying features of Planet Coaster in that the scale is not very good. You can see how big the doors are, and then these door pieces, these are correctly scaled doors, but then the actual cavernous opening of the staff building is massive compared to the size of the doors. Everything in Planet Coaster is slightly overscaled. Now, you could make an argument that that's true for a lot of theme parks in the real world. Everything is, very eccentric and unrealistically proportioned because it's all meant about escapism and fantasy and all that. But for a staff building, like a generic staff building, I figured it'd be better to have correct scaling. So I just put walls over the cavernous archway entryway to the staff room and then put doors over it. I mean, it's not going to be that realistic because now staff are just going to walk through a solid wall to get to the staff building, but I think it looks better than just having that black cave opening to the staff room. The toilets, I think I just kept the Planet Coaster scale, and I'll just hope that it doesn't look too bad. So I think I'm not going for anything too extravagant for these shop fronts. It's going to be somewhat themed, it's not just going to be generic smooth concrete or anything like that, but it's not going to be, this ain't going to be no Disney. Oh, here I'm actually, you can quickly see me doing some path covers. You can't really make plazas in this game particularly easily. You may have noticed a lot of the pathways still look a bit janky. That will be sorted out by using things like path covers, scenery to kind of hide holes in the path, that sort of thing. So I just used some hexagonal blocks to cover those parts. I think it looks quite nice to be honest. It actually looks like that was an intentional design feature of the path rather than me covering up the floors with my plaza design. Anyway, back to the construction of the toilet block. Yep, this is going to be fairly simple facades. They're going to look nice. They're going to look like there was some thought put into the design of them, at least in terms of the aesthetics and all that. But it ain't going to be, Disney Main Street, it's not going to be super themed. It's just some light theming. I'm going to try and incorporate a little bit of forced perspective into some of the buildings as well, just to kind of keep the scale, nice theme park scale. I know I said earlier that a lot of theme parks have oversized stuff, but on the flip side of that, a lot of theme parks have much smaller scale stuff. Like, for example, again, I believe Disney's Main Street, as you ascend the floors, like in terms of the window sizes of those buildings, everything shrinks down. So the windows on the top level of the buildings on Disney's Main Street are actually smaller than a conventional building's windows would be, to kind of give the illusion that they're bigger and grander than they actually are. I think that's true for the Main Street, at least. I know for a fact it's definitely true for Cinderella's castle. Like when you get to the top of Cinderella's castle is it Cinderella's or Sleeping Beauty's? I don't know. The castle, you guys all know what I'm talking about. The castle in the center of the Disney park, everything gets much smaller as you ascend. So suddenly, when you get to the top of the tower, the doorways are like very small. I don't know if a person could actually fit through. I don't really know how big they are. This is stuff I probably should have researched before I started telling you guys all this, in air quotes, information, but whatever. Disney, if you just Google the words Disney forced perspective, there are some great photos. There's one of like this guy working on one of the castles of a different ride in the park, and he's literally the same height as one of the one of the turrets, so that's pretty funny. Anyway, yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and use some forced perspective when constructing the park. Mainly this building that I'm constructing here. So I built this little that little glass tower, which I really like how that came out, actually. Building that little glass tower, then we're going to build the rest of the building next to it. So this is only a one-story building in terms of the game. I think is it 4 meters high or is it 5 meters high? I can't remember if I think I might have added a little 1 meter tall wall on top of that shop front, but I don't remember. Just rewind the footage. I can't be bothered to go back and check. We've got to press on. But I'm going to make this a 2-story building. So we've had some windows to the, in air quotes again, top floor of that building, just to kind of give the illusion that it's a bit bigger, a bit more grandiose than it actually is. I don't know. I think it makes things look a lot more kind of cute, incorporating the forced perspective, and it makes the buildings have a bit more character and make them look a bit more, I don't know, building-like, I suppose, rather than just what it looks like at the moment, which is just a painted shed. So that's what I'm doing for this building here. I think the rest of the buildings are not. This is one of the more detailed ones on the Main Street, although granted the Main Street is not that big. Let's face it, there's only 1 or 2 more left to go, to be honest. But I really like how this one came out. Maybe you could leave a comment below, because I think the algorithm likes it when there's lots of comments. And yeah, leave a comment below which is your favorite building in general, but also your favorite building on this Main Street. Mine is probably this building, to be honest. So interested to see if you guys agree, disagree, what have you. But the construction of, this street here was definitely by far the most time-consuming aspect of this park, because, I'm building rides, there's not much to it, is there, I suppose? Like, flat rides, you just plop it down. Roller coasters can take a long time, especially if you're doing the 4-meter technique, but at least for this park, where we've only got a very tiny space to work with, the roller coaster really didn't take very much time to construct. So this construction of these shops here definitely represented the largest, or at least the most time-consuming aspect of the park. But I think it's by far the most important thing when trying to make a park look realistic. Like I say, one of the focuses of this competition was that we have to focus on realism/plausibility, and also to make it look aesthetically pleasing. So having sort of a nice realistic series of shops with good theming and some forced perspective, I think it looks nice. And you can tell, obviously, some money was invested in them to make them look nice. They're not just corrugated iron sheds. But they clearly didn't cost that much. They're not like towering, big things with loads of detailed interiors. They are basically just facades. And that's another thing I wanted to work into the construction of this street. At the moment, these are all very clearly separated buildings. But you may have noticed, so far, I haven't constructed the back of any of them. I think except for the staff building, but that was always going to be its own thing anyway. That's because I want them to basically be just one homogeneous concrete building with just a very fake facade running along the strip that faces into the park. So the backside of these buildings will just be one great big concrete block. It's a nice illusion from the ground. This is how all theme parks with these sorts of shopping streets are, where it's all like nice from the guest side, but from backstage, it's just, warehouse. And from a bird's eye view, it doesn't look that great as well. Slight problem, obviously, this being that there are 2 rides in this park where it'll be very, very, very easy to see into the backstage, these being the drop tower and the Ferris wheel. And I guess you could argue, so you could also see the backstage quite easily from the roller coaster. But the thing is, the roller coaster, the lift hill is over and done with so quickly, it's not that much of an issue. And I think when you're on the lift hill of that roller coaster, you're not really looking around. You're looking straight ahead and enjoying the ride, I guess. I mean, that's what I do when I'm on roller coasters, although I've never been on a Eurofighter. Maybe the ride experience is different, but I doubt it. In fact, it's probably even harder to look around because it's a vertical lift tour, but I digress. Here you can see me constructing the restaurant. And again, I kind of had to work around the giant, goofy scale of Planet Coaster. We've got another example of a cave. We have to try and scale down a little bit to make it look slightly more realistically sized. In the end, it's quite big. It's the biggest facade in this park because I had to work around that big gaping entrance. But I think it worked out pretty well in the end. We've got that nice... I'm going for a sort of... a stucco stone construction. I think it looked pretty nice. Hopefully, hopefully there's some agreement with the comments as well. But there's not much to it. I decided at this point I couldn't really be bothered to carry on with different styles for every building. So this restaurant and the two little food stalls, is that a street box coffee shop and a pizza pen, I believe? They're just going to be part of the same building. Well, I mean, technically it's all part of the same building, as I just said. It's going to be this big fake facade on a concrete warehouse. But, you know, in terms of the illusion of differentiation between the buildings, these are going to be part of the same building. They're going to have the same architectural style, all the good stuff. And as you can see, that probably didn't even need saying. You can probably tell what's happening by watching the footage. I should probably remember that these are videos at the end of the day, not a podcast. God forbid this is a podcast. I would have definitely switched it off much earlier if there wasn't some kind of other stimulus to keep me going. But, you know, sometimes I should learn that I could just show and don't have to worry about telling, because my telling often doesn't adequately communicate what it is I'm trying to say. The number of times I say in these commentaries, like, hopefully the footage is talking for me, because that wasn't a very good explanation. I would probably be a very rich person if I had a dime for every time I said that. And in these troubling economic times, I gotta take all the dimes I can get, even though it's not even the currency for my country. Gotta take what I can get. I'm not allowed to discuss, apparently. I mean, I've mentioned it before and it's not affected my monetization, so who knows? But I don't want to risk it now. Now everyone's instilled the fear into me. I can't say why, but this is obviously the premise of this part, that a lot of us are spending a bit more time at home, need something to do. So that's obviously an invitation to you guys watching as well. If you want to get down in this competition, I'll leave links to everything relevant down below. There's a link to download the actual park. You didn't like the map to build on. And I think someone, because the problem with the map is that it incorporates a lot of the DLC pieces, like the Vintage Pack, the Studios Pack. But if you've only got the base game, I think someone then did create a variant of it that doesn't require any DLC. So there's always, I mean, I'll probably just put a link to the actual proper map in the description and a link to the Discord server. And then someone pinned something in the relevant channel to get the DLC free map if you need it. So there we are. And maybe post what you've made in my Discord server or whatever, because I've got a Discord server too that I probably should promote a bit more than I do. Anyway, what are we doing here? Moving on from that little divergence just then. So it looks like I'm pretty much finishing off this building here, and then we can start working on the back portion of it. Well, I mean, first, you can probably spice it up a little bit with some windows. Again, put a little window at the top that's a smaller scale than the others, but part of the same style. So again, incorporating a little bit of the forced perspective. I mean, it's not a fantastic example of forced perspective, I'll give you that. But, you know, it just helps sell the illusion that these buildings, at least at first glance, look bigger than they actually are. And then I thought I'd add some big tacky signs to the Street Fox coffee shop and the pizza pen, because this is, at the end of the day, a somewhat low-budget park. And I kind of like that kind of tacky look to them. And now I'm just putting a little planter here just to cover up that hole in the path. There's another fairly egregious gap next to the ATM machine that we need to cover up as well. So again, just going to use the planters. I believe these are from the Vintage Pack, but they are by far my favorite way of covering up holes in paths, which is sadly a big thing in this game. I don't know how I would design the path system. I mean, the city skylines approach how you build roads in city skylines is the obvious answer to how you could improve the path system, but I don't really play city skylines that much. Like, I've played it a bit. I'm not that good at it. I prefer Planet Coaster, put it that way. But I don't know how easy it would be to make plazas and stuff using a system like that. Maybe it's really easy. I don't know. But yeah, plazas are definitely quite hard to construct in Planet Coaster unless you kind of build really thick paths and kind of loop them back on each other. You always end up with holes, but you can always fill it in with, like, you know, things like this: planters, bins, paving, that sort of thing. That's kind of how you have to build plazas in this game. So you end up with a lot of gaps, but I think that looks pretty good. I really like it when you cover up the holes in a path, like with a planter or what have you, and it looks like that was always intended to be there. It wasn't just there for the sake of covering up a hole in the path. That's always the best thing that I try and aim for. And I hope you agree, but I think it came out pretty nice, that planter just there. Now we're just going to build the actual ugly side of this building. So obviously not going to take anywhere near as long as the front side because, as I said earlier, it's just one giant concrete block. I've been doing a lot of building of warehouses recently, actually, because I'm still working on Velocity Lake. Worry not. That will be coming, I guess not next week, because next week will be the second and final episode of this mini-series. But I am continuing to work on Velocity Lake regardless. That'll be coming, I guess, in 2 weeks. And I'm doing lots of work on the Backstage part of that park. So warehouses, much bigger scaled warehouses, obviously, than this part, because Velocity Lake is much, much bigger than this little park just here. And I was about to say the name of this park, but I don't really have a name for it. It's still the Untitled Micro Park. I think I put, you may have noticed just then actually, there's a little sign at the front saying "Name me, please." The idea being that you download the map and just rename that sign. But I haven't thought of a name for it, so I've put a placeholder name of Micromania because I love my alliteration, or should I say, I adore my alliteration. That was terrible. But it's definitely not there to stay. I mean, if you guys think of any better name, leave it below. And how many times have I said, if you've got an idea for this, leave it below? This comments is going to be a complete mess. Guys, what is your favourite brand of pesto sauce? Leave it below, and I'll... I don't really like pesto, so I don't even know what that's an option. I mean, for me, I'm always torn between what kind of curry pastes I like getting. Like, I do like making my curries. I don't make them complete from scratch, but I like to make the sauce from paste. So not just use the jars of curry sauce, but like get the paste, then add all the spices, make it up that sort of way. And I'm always torn between what kind of paste to use. I generally go with the really spicy ones, so I have to use as much of it. But I don't know, I like my Madras paste. Rogan Josh is good, but then sometimes I like a Balti or even a tikka masala. So... curries. Well, maybe I should start doing curry review. I mean, again, how many review series have I got running at this point? I got my whiskey review series. I got a beer review series now, apparently. Now I'm doing curry reviews. So, my favorite curry. I don't really have a favorite curry, to be honest. I mean, when I'm out, I'm a bit of a normie. I'll get a tikka masala or something like that. But, sometimes I like to spice it up. Is that a pun? I'm going to say it's a pun. I like to spice it up a bit. And get something else, like a Rogan Josh or something like that. And now the construction of the warehouse is pretty much done. So I can hopefully try and think of a different thing to talk about. I don't know. This commentary went downhill a long time ago. We're almost at the end, actually. Like, I think I arbitrarily drew a line in my Sony Vegas timeline as to, where to split the episode up. Okay, actually, no, I think it's the 36-minute mark. Yeah, because the whole thing is like an hour and 10 minutes. I think that's too much. Would you agree? for an episode of this that you're currently watching, I think that's a bit too much to ask. And whenever I do these longer episodes, I have a look at the analytics afterwards, and I see that the retention rate is nowhere near as good as the shorter episodes. And this I would still call a very long episode of Planet Coaster. So I think it will probably be asking a bit much to ask you guys to watch for an hour and 10 minutes of this stuff. But here you go. There's the little shopping street. Not playing at completely real-time speed. But there you go. There's the example of the buildings. And of course, that's the vast majority of the buildings constructed. There are still the little ones, for example, the information booth, the infirmary, the Pip Shop Water, and a toilet block as well still need doing. But those are much, much smaller building projects. Oh, and I guess, in fact, a big one would be the actual station for the roller coaster. Still needs doing. I don't think I've shown a POV of the roller coaster, at least not a real-time POV. Don't worry, I'll probably show that next episode, to be honest. Gotta give you some reason to return to this series, so that could be something to look forward to, because I don't think I ride it again now until I actually get round to constructing the station. And we've still got, a very exciting thing to do. Fans of Velocity Lake may know what I'm talking about, and that is curbing. Do love my curbing. We're going to do some curbing, we're going to play some fences. It's going to be really fun. I hope. I'm just trying to think what there is to talk about here. As you can see, I'm not following the paths completely, but as I said earlier, that's because I'm not using the correct ground texture. When this is all done, I use the ground texture that actually matches the color of the paths. So then they're seamless. So it doesn't really matter if the fences aren't completely following the exact course of the pathways. Obviously, not the case for the lighter colored path. That is going to be a problem. So I'm just trying to sort of force it to follow a kind of grid-like shape as much as possible, and then we'll fill in any gaps with pathway covers, much like we did earlier with the planters those hexagonal blocks on the ground as well, that sort of thing. Like this bit here is going to be quite difficult too, because I want this to be a straight edge against the queue line for the Ferris wheels. We'll have to come up with something creative to cover up this piece of tarmac. I talk about it like I don't already know what I do. I have already done it. It's going to be in this. Oh, never mind. It is being done before your very eyes. It's just this kind of wooden balcony thing. Like anyone who plays Planet Coaster a lot will see that and immediately know why it's there. It's covering up an imperfection in the path. But, you know, to the untrained eye, it might look like that was just an aesthetic flair that the designer of this theme park went with. So that's the goal I try and aspire to when I'm covering up pathway holes, is trying to make it look like it was planned to be there rather than having to be there because Planet Coaster's path tool doesn't really ever do what you want it to. Now, for most of this park, I'm going to be using those vintage fence pieces, silver ones to be exact, and then for queue lines, they're going to be painted a red colour just because, I don't know, thought it might be cute to have a slight distinction. But for fencing off the roller coaster, I decided to go with a slightly taller fence just because obviously a roller coaster is a bit more dangerous than the other rides. Like, I guess if you really tried your best, you could find a way to get killed by any of the rides, but the roller coaster is probably the easiest one to do serious harm to yourself, and it's probably also the area that guests are most likely to want to break into, just because if their phone or whatever falls out their pocket on the ride, they might try and sneak in. There have been some very horrible deaths in real. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not a very nice topic, but there have been some instances where people have been decapitated or otherwise very seriously harmed by roller coasters after breaking in to go and retrieve a phone or something. Guys, don't do it. All right, an iPhone is not worth losing your head for. So just some general life advice on this channel: don't break into roller coasters, because usually the roller coaster will win if you fight it. Anyway, slightly morbid tangent aside, here you can see me putting in one of the path covers I said earlier I would need to be putting in. So I decided to go with these sort of little canopies. I'll put a little bench inside it as well. And I think kind of looks nice having these little shelters intermittently scattered throughout the park. Again, I could totally see these just being featured as part of the park's design. I know when I'm playing Parkitect, for example, series I don't think I've ever actually made a Parkitect video on this channel. Maybe I should. But when I'm playing Parkitect, I like putting little, covers every now and then throughout a park, just because it kind of adds to the flair. And on hot days, you might want to sit underneath the canopy. Something like that. That's what they're there for. And this bit, I kind of just gave up, clearly. Said, we'll just put some curbing on there. Maybe we could put like a vending machine or something on that spot at some point. But right now, I think that's going to be left as is. What else needs doing? Oh, yeah, we need to continue with the fence along the roller coaster's perimeter. And, like I say, a lot of what we do with the roller coaster, well, a lot of the stuff that we still need to do for the roller coaster, I should say, will be done next episode. So obviously the station itself, the queue line up to the station for the most part, still needs work doing to it. The transfer track and maintenance shed needs doing, and some of the supports are lacking. So we need to some of the supports got deleted because everything's so close together, flat rides, pathways, all that. A lot of the supports got deleted. So we'll have to rebuild them manually just to make sure that the roller coaster looks realistically supported. Like, you can make some pretty remarkably physics-defying roller coasters in this game if you really want to. But if you want to go for realism, which is one of the criteria of this challenge, is to try and make it look like a believable park, we should probably rebuild those supports in a realistic way. But there we are, got a little ground view of everything we've done so far. Again, not playing at real-time speed, just to kind of keep the video pace going, but this is a little showcase of what we've done so far. I think it's looking pretty good. Like, it's hard to believe there's so much footage left to go. I think there are still a lot of I's to dot, T's to cross, all that good stuff. We still need to place a lot of fencing, and just a lot of, it's all quite barren. We haven't opened the park either as well. And of course, there are some buildings that need doing as well. So I guess there is still a lot of stuff that needs doing. It just doesn't look immediately obvious. I guess because all the stuff that has the big footprints, your flat rides, your roller coaster, your big main street buildings, they're all done. So although the park looks like it's fairly clustered, there is still a lot of stuff that needs doing. So that looks forward to. And this is the color I went with for the queue lines. I thought it might be cool to have a slight distinction in terms of the color of the fencing. So although it's the same kind of fence, I'm not going for a different type of fence, I'm having a different color. Just kind of a cute thing. I don't know. Don't really know. It just breaks up the monotony of the fences. One thing I'm still not sure about is the white barriers for the entrances and exits of the rides, and indeed those horrible grey bollards at the front of the entrance queues. They look a bit naff, especially how the fences terminate at them. Like the fences clearly just clip inside those white barriers and all those bollard pieces. So it might be a good idea to try and figure out a way of covering them up. I believe, I want to say the lady designer or someone. That's great, isn't it? It's either the one specific person or anyone else on planet Earth, one of those two, created a pack on the Steam Workshop called Bollard Covers or something like that, where they created a little collection of lots of things that you can use to cover up those bollards perfectly without taking up too much additional space. Maybe I should look into that pack. Although, I don't know, I kind of like how everything in my parks is designed by me. Like, I don't use any workshop items, and I'm also not using any Theme Maker's Toolkit items, either in this little mini-series or indeed in, like, Velocity Lake, just because I've mentioned this before, and I really don't want to make it sound like I'm slagging off or otherwise downplaying the skill of those that use Theme Maker's Toolkit. But one of the things I always appreciate when looking at really, really detailed and, you know, impressive Planet Coaster constructions is seeing how the stock parts have been used in such a way that you can use them to create things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And it's like, even like the stock map of this park, like when I downloaded the park file to start construction, I had a look at the buildings and stuff, and just bashed my microphone's boom arm. Hopefully it didn't get picked up. But yeah, like some of the buildings in this like park, when I downloaded the map, like things like the little chandelier as you go in, the actual pole that holds the chandelier is just a lamppost that's just been clipped into the little tin roof of the entrance building. I appreciate little things like that, and I've used that exact method as well to create bollards in the ground. It's actually just an inverted lamppost. I've got a little soft spot for seeing interesting ways of using the stock parts to get more mileage out of them than what their just, I don't know, intended purpose was. I guess in air quotes there. So building the other side of Main Street, which is only a couple of shops. Well, they're not even shops, are there? There's an information booth and the infirmary unit. So fairly simple construction. It's a very narrow footprint as well, this building. So I didn't really have much room to work with. I didn't want to have huge facades and awnings because the entrance corridor is quite claustrophobic. Everything's very crammed together. So I tried to keep that building as flat as possible, just because I didn't want too much intrusion into the main path. But guys, I'm going to leave it there. We've done the Main Street shops. We've done the layout of the roller coaster, all of the flat rides. The park is really coming together, but there's still a lot of work that needs doing to get this thing fully finished. So you've got all of that to look forward to next episode. I'll probably put like a separate episode for the POVs and tour and all that. So maybe I might even do a double upload next week of Planet Coaster for the two separate videos. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to stop talking now. I'll put some links on screen. On the left-hand side is a link to the Velocity Lake playlist if you want to check out a different Planet Coaster park I'm working on. On the right-hand side is just a video chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithms. There's also a link to subscribe and check out Patreon if you'd like to, as well as links to things like Instagram, Discord, Twitter, all that good stuff in the description. Guys, thank you again so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.